Okay, so welcome to the last class. So it seems quite a while ago that we started, and it was 13 weeks ago, and came through a lot of material since then. But if you look back at some of the things we discussed in chapters 1 and 2, and getting ready for our first individual project, and some of the things that we covered back in those early chapters might seem like a blur now, but we actually did come a long way. And if you remember back, we did kind of an introduction in chapters 1, 2, and 3, where we were focused on mostly on the data part of it, and looking at data, what it represents. It wasn't until we get into discussion of databases and how we can organize data that we actually reached the point where we were making information, which is making sense of raw data. And then in the last third of the course, where we did projects 5 and 6, that was actually when we started creating knowledge from the information that we had created from the data. So the good thing about the course is that it covers a wide range of topics. Some of them, granted, are more interesting than others. The topics of e-commerce and digital markets and all that buying on the internet is always interesting. The developing information systems is an interesting look at how information systems get developed, and that leads us into Project 6 that we have on the go this week. So we were able to use spreadsheets and database software for most of the course, but we did have to move off of that. And with the help of Google and some of the Google tools and live code, some of the things that we saw there in live code was it was a coding tool that we could use without having too much prior knowledge, and actually get something done. And that's the tool there that we're using for Project 6. And it is quite a tool. If you watch some of the videos and dig around the website a bit, you'll see that they're using this in elementary schools and in high schools and different things like that to get the kids interested in coding. And it really helps that you can spend a very little amount of time, because your focus is not computer science, and get something that works, not something that's great, but something that works. And the fact that you can create an iOS or an Android app for your phone is really quite amazing. And it's true what they say, it's 10 times easier and it's free. Now, wouldn't probably recommend this for anything that is going to be industrial strength or used for real, we'll say, but it's a great learning tool, and it takes away some of the drudgery and memorization that you'd have to go through if you're learning a programming language. And then last week and the week before, we kind of looked at the whole area of project management and the pain points that IT projects represent, mainly because all projects are risky, but in particular, IT projects seem to present the most risk, only because they're usually unique, and a lot of times it's a creative process, something that hasn't been done before, and there's no sample to follow. There's no blueprint. It may be a new language. It may be a new hardware interface, and a lot of times it's hard to gauge time and cost because everything is so new. But that's what makes MIS so interesting, and IT in general so interesting, is that it's always new, it's always changing, there's always something new coming out. You're not going to be bored in working in this area, that's for sure. The downside of it is, though, that the shelf life of your skills, you know, your Excel, your Access, if you get into the area of database, your database skills, they usually have a shelf life of about 18 months, so about 1.5 years, and then everything changes. Now, what doesn't change are the basics of what is a database, what is a spreadsheet, how do we make sense of information. That's pretty well constant, and that'll stay constant for quite a while. But there'll be new tools and new concepts and new ways of doing things, and every 18 months you can count on things changing in a big way. So we have to keep up, and we have to read. We have to read everything that's new in the area that we're interested in. My area that I'm interested in is project management, so I try to read as much as I can about that one area, IT project management. It's not even project management in its entirety. It's only the IT portion of project management. And I try to read and get my hands on everything that's new. And the problem is you can't read fast enough to keep up with it. So, you know, the challenge would be to pick an area that, you know, you may be interested in. Maybe it's e-commerce. Maybe it's supply chain management, maybe it's customer relationship management. We covered, you know, a lot of topics. You know, we didn't go deep into any one of them. But, you know, you can get a master's degree and a PhD in supply chain management, and so you know there's a lot that you can delve into just in that one area. So it's not to discourage you by any means to say that, you know, you can't read fast enough to keep up, but if you don't start, then you're basically giving up at the starting line. So you do have to enter the race, and, you know, pick an area that you'd like to know more about, and delve into it. So it's that type of field for sure. So as we discussed the first class, if you look at the technology that we have today, 100% of the technology we have today will represent only 1% in 2050, and that's interesting from the point of view that we look at the tools we have today, and we look at how small the technology is, and the fact that we can wear technology and it's around us all the time, and we can be in touch with anybody in the world that we want to be in touch with, and we really can't picture it getting any better, right? How could it get any better, right? But it's going to. It's going to get almost 100% better. And the tools that we use today, and the thin notebooks that we have today, and the handheld devices that we have, they'll be boat anchors, right? They will. You'll be throwing them away. Like, I can't believe that, you know, my iPhone 5, I think it's it's not a 5, it's a 4S. I have an iPhone 4S. There's not a thing wrong with it, but I got this deal to get an iPhone 6 for $0 down and a cheaper plan, a cheaper monthly plan. So, you know, my handheld device is a boat anchor now. It's no good to me. It's it'll probably be recycled somewhere, and you know, it's still usable technology. And when you look at computers, you know, they're basically planned obsolescence. That means they don't want you to fix them, right? They want you to move to the next model. So, you know, if you find technology is you know, maybe unfair that they do that with technology, well, you got to realize what they're doing. They're not promising you that technology is going to last for any more than 3 to 4 years. And if it does, that's just a bonus, right? So we will get there in the next 35 years or so, and it'll be quite a ride. I mean, if you look back 35 years, I can remember 35 years ago. You know, personal computers, if you could get them, they were, you know, the size of that chair, and they cost $8,000. So, you know, that's 35 years of progress. So it, you know, it will come to be. You know, we will see new things developed. You will be part of that. You know, developing new things, and you know, the ideas that we come up with as society will spur on these new inventions. But it's also meant to encourage you to, you know, to think of things that are wild. Like a couple of weeks ago, I said, you know, maybe we won't have post-secondary education, and that's just me thinking ahead and thinking about something wild, right? Like, why wouldn't we have colleges and universities in maybe 10 years' time? That's not very far away, is it? Well, I can see a day where it becomes redundant. We should be able to cover everything we need to cover in an electronic format. I mean, there's so much knowledge out there now that what we need to do is we need to find a way to capture the knowledge and deliver it to the person, and have that person study that knowledge for a period of time, and then grant some type of credential. That's really what it is, right? When you think of it. You spend 4 years in university, you study a body of knowledge, and then you certify on it by testing, and then you walk away with a piece of paper. Is there another way of doing that? Sure there is. Now, I studied well, I'm still studying now, but I took my whole master's degree and my doctorate online. Never set foot in the university. Don't even know where it is. I graduated from Stratford PharmaSafe. My parchment was mailed to me, and I picked it up at the nearest postal outlet, which was the pharmacy down the road from me. So, you know, that's going on now, right? And you know, I can see it changing. It has to change. And you know, it's archaic the way we do it now. Because some of the classes you go to, you have better information from your seat than the person up front has. The person up front may have studied the subject, but have not kept up on the latest and greatest, right? And you're looking stuff up on Wikipedia and you're saying, that person is about 2 or 3 years behind, right? Yeah, so it's scary. Yeah, but not in this class, not in this class. We're always bleeding edge here. We're always bleeding edge, that's for sure. So, you know, when you look back, you can escalate through these levels of data, information, and knowledge very, very quickly. There's no such thing as not being good at computers. That's like not being good at walking. because that's what it is, right? It's a necessary evil or necessary joy, depending on how you look at it. There's no job that technology has not intervened in. Every job has an element of computer technology in it. So we do have to apply ourselves and you know, get into areas that we're maybe not comfortable with, right? So, you know, the whole idea of coding that we're going to talk about today, it's like, you know, why would I need to do that, and why would I need to know about that? And the important part is you don't need to memorize it and become real good at it, because somebody else in your organization that's specialized in that body of knowledge will be doing that as a service, but you have to manage that, right? You're probably going to be a project manager or HR manager, marketing manager, some type of management position, and you will have to work with these people and manage them and, you know, move them along and pay for their service and everything else. So you do have to know a little bit about what they do. Yeah, so one of the things that I was looking at today in preparation for the course, our last class, I should say, in this course, was some of the stuff that Dan Pink has to say. In chapter 15, what we see in chapter 15 is the factors that drive internationalization of business and alternative strategies for global business. And, you know, it's all about looking out into the world and casting a net to see what we can bring back as far as, you know, what we can do with technology to make the world smaller. Well, we've already come a long way in doing that. And you know, when we look at the case studies in the chapter, a lot of big companies have been able to conquer the distant communications and having people work for them in all parts of the world, and teleworking and the idea of running a business 24 hours a day. There's all kinds of companies doing that. So when it's 5 o'clock here, you know, it's 12 o'clock noon somewhere else, it's 5 o'clock in the morning somewhere else, and people just continuously pass off work from one continent to another. And that's what a lot of companies are doing now. But one of the best videos that I've seen in a while is this one here from Dan Pink, and what he talks about is the idea of he has three things, I guess, that his message represents, and that's abundance, and Asia, and automation. And we'll go through this video kind of pieces at a time.
On the side, but in a very demanding job, that was difficult, and I felt like if I stayed around writing for other people, eventually that voice, that internal voice, would be suffocated. What worries me a little bit about some of the younger folks, say folks in their 20s, is that they've been so indoctrinated in the school system that's focused on right answers and pleasing authority figures that they have, in some ways, not even allowed their intrinsic motivation to blossom. When I talk to college classes, it's always a little bit disturbing because I find that I have a sea of faces looking at me saying, is this going to be on the test? We've got a 9-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 3-year-old. Right now, they all seem headed for right-brain careers. My 9-year-old daughter wants to be a novelist. My 7-year-old daughter wants to be an art teacher. And my 3-year-old son wants to operate his own digger truck. I want my kids, I want everybody to find out what it is that they do out of a sense of enjoyment and challenge. Not for the external rewards, okay? Forget about that. Do what you do because you like it, because it's fun, interesting, because it's challenging, because it's meaningful. People who are intrinsically motivated, they do just fine. They really do just fine. Okay? It's the folks who, the folks I worry about, the folks who are always chasing these kind of external rewards, external validation. I think over time, they start to wonder what their life is all about, and they have huge regrets.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks so much. Thanks. Well, thank you. Thank you for that very warm welcome. One of the things about my past, which I often don't reveal, is that in a former life I worked as a political speechwriter. And because of that, people sometimes ask me, Dan, what makes a good speech? And I've thought about that question quite a bit over the years. And I've discovered that good speeches in general have three key elements. Three key elements to a good speech: brevity, levity, and repetition. Let me say that again. Brevity, levity, and repetition. So I promise to be reasonably brief. I promise not to be too severe and serious. And I promise you, and I guarantee you, I will honor this promise. I will repeat the important stuff over and over and over and over again until you want to scream. Now, here's what I want to talk about. Sort of divided into two halves. The first half, I want to tell you about some broad forces in the economy that are putting a premium on a very different approach to business, a very different approach to life, a very different set of abilities that are necessary to succeed in the 21st century. Then, I want to talk about the 6 particular abilities that matter most and how smart individuals and smart organizations are putting them into practice. And I want to get into this by confessing. I want to tell you about the biggest mistake I ever made, and that's going to launch us into this conversation. The biggest mistake I ever made occurred about 20 years ago, when in a moment of youthful indiscretion, I went to law school. Now, I did not do especially well in law school, to put it mildly. I, in fact, graduated in the part of my law school class that made the top 90% possible. Now, if I can digress here for a moment, it turned out that happily enough for me that law school, more than anything else I've done in my life, dramatically, profoundly, I would argue, permanently increased my earning power. Because in law school, I met my wife. Otherwise, it was a total loss. Total loss. I didn't enjoy it. I graduated massively in debt. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't do well. I never practiced law a day in my life. If I could press the rewind button and live that part of my life over again, I would in a second. Which, of course, raises a question, which I'm going to toss over to you, which is this. Why did I do that? Why did I do that? Anybody have an answer? Society? Close? Parents? Exactly. It turns out that this horrific decision, like so many negative things in life, is actually my parents' fault. But let me explain what I mean by that. When I was a kid, and I grew up in the Midwest, Columbus, Ohio, grew up in the early 1970s, middle-class family, middle of America. When I was a kid, parents like mine dished out the same basic plate of advice to their children. Many of you probably were on the receiving end of this advice. Some of you might have been on the dispensing end of this advice. And the advice went like this: get good grades, go to college, pursue a profession that would give you some amount of economic security, and maybe a smidgen of prestige. So what did that mean in practice? That meant that if you were, as I was, as my wife was, reasonably good at subjects like English and history, go to law school. Let's say you're better at math and science. What do? Go to medical school or get an engineering degree. And even in that economy, okay, which is the early 1970s, okay, before globalization, before the internet, even in that very buoyant economy, if blood grossed you out, your verbal skills were a little shaky, you could still go and get a job as an accountant. But if you think about, let's think about those professions for a moment. One accountant just walked out of the room. Well, if you think about those professions for a moment, okay? Think about those professions. Accountants and lawyers and engineers, but more important than that, think about the abilities. This is the key here. The abilities at the heart of those professions. Those were the abilities that mattered most. Those were the abilities that got you ahead in your career. Those were the abilities that organizations were demanding. Those were the abilities that in some sense even fueled the entire macroeconomy. Well, my argument is that those abilities still matter but they matter less. Those engineer abilities, those lawyer abilities, those accountant abilities, they still matter, but they matter less. And a different set of abilities matters more. And there's a way that I've chosen to explain this. Now, I'm a writer, and one of the ways that people like to torture writers, and there are many, is to tell them that a picture is worth 1,000 words. But good writers, and I would argue good business people, know that while a picture is worth 1,000 words, sometimes a metaphor is worth 1,000 pictures. A picture may be worth 1,000 words, but a metaphor is often worth 1,000 pictures. And I think that there is a metaphor that explains what's going on in the economy, in careers, in business today. And the metaphor is this. This is a brain, a human brain, a model of a human brain. Same size and weight of a brain. See, it sort of fits right here. Now, tempted as I am to give you a little mini lecture on neuroanatomy, I'll resist, and instead point you to probably the main, most distinguishing topographical feature of this brain, of your brain, of my brain, of everybody's brain. Running down the center of this brain, you see right here, is a Mason-Dixon line, cleaving this brain into two equal halves, the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. Now, many of you have probably heard about left brain this and right brain that over the years, and a lot of what you've heard is garbage. This is one of those ideas where the popularization of the idea has galloped far ahead of the science behind it. But in the last 5 years especially, the science has caught up, and we know, thanks to functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI's brain scans, we know an enormous amount about how our brains are organized. We're barely beginning to understand our brains, they're so complex, but we do have a sense at a very broad level of how our brains are organized. And there is, it turns out, this very elegant, very efficient division of labor in our brains. Our brains have different departments that carry out different functions. The left hemisphere deals with tasks that are logical, linear, sequential, analytical. Okay, make sense? This side of the brain, the right hemisphere of the brain, not better, not worse, just a different department. It deals with tasks that are more artistic, more empathic, more about synthesis rather than analysis, more about the big picture, more about context rather than text. There you have it. 50 years of neuroscience in 60 seconds. Now, here's where the metaphor comes in. It used to be that these abilities mattered most. The logical, linear, sequential, analytical, SAT, spreadsheet, zero in on the right answer abilities. These were the ones, metaphorically, that used to matter the most. And today, and I want to underscore this right now, today these abilities are still absolutely 100% necessary. Okay, let me say that again. Absolutely 100% necessary. But, no longer sufficient. And these abilities, okay, and these abilities characteristic of the right hemisphere of the brain, artistry, empathy, inventiveness, big picture thinking, these abilities are now the first among equals. These abilities are the ones that matter most. That's the punchline. Now, you offer up this argument, and you often get a bipolar response. Okay? On one pole are artists and designers who think this is all pretty cool and nifty. They think it makes perfect intuitive sense. Okay? On the other pole, you have engineers, or accountants, or worse, lawyers, who think that this is, and this is not the exact language they use, a bunch of hooey. Okay? What's really important to understand here is that what I'm saying here, this tilt from the left brain thinking to right brain thinking, is not some kind of fantasy, is not some kind of yearning, it's not some kind of wish. Wouldn't it be lovely if we had an economy built less on these cold, hard, analytic abilities and more on artistry and empathy, and we could all link arms and frolic through the daisies? No. The truth of the matter is that I am myself a very, very left brain guy. I'm very analytical, I'm very numerate, I'm the most sequential person you've ever met in your life. I cannot multitask to save my life. In my hierarchy of loves, I've got my wife and our 3 children, number 1, and number 2 in my hierarchy of loves are charts and graphs. I love charts and graphs. If I want to explain something to someone, I'm going to draw your chart. Okay? But over the last couple of years, I have taken a very hard, very analytical, very left-brain look at the evidence, at the facts, at the data, crunched the numbers, looked hard at what's really going on in organizations, in individual careers, and in the macroeconomy, brought to bear the fiercest kind of analytic reasoning that I could muster, enlisted other analytic minds on the task to really look hard and crunch the numbers and look at the evidence and take apart the data. And after doing that, I don't even think it's close that the scales are tilted, and that people like me have a lot of catching up to do. But I want to make this argument for you over the next few minutes because I think it gives you the context of what how your career is progressing, how your organization is moving. So I'm going to make an argument here in public, despite my law school performance, okay? It's a cause and effect, linear argument. The effect is that the scales are tilted, making the left brain abilities necessary no longer sufficient, the right brain abilities the first among equals, and the causes are threefold. They are abundance, Asia, and automation. Abundance, you're laughing at this. It took me 4 months to get them all to start with A, okay? Abundance, Asia, automation. Let's start with abundance. Now, what I'm going to say here is somewhat politically incorrect, but I will say it anyway. The United States of America is doing very, very well. Very well. Deep into the middle class, this country has a standard of living that is breathtaking by historic standards and international standards. Now, we have a problem in this country with poverty. We've got 12% of our country living in poverty. We've got 10% worried they're going to fall through the trap door into poverty. That's a moral disgrace on its own terms. But it's a double disgrace, a triple disgrace, a quadruple disgrace when you look at how well off the rest of the country is. If you look at the data, this country is doing spectacularly well. Let me give you a few examples. Let's take automobiles, okay? My grandparents, when they were my age, an automobile was essentially a rich person's toy, a luxury item. You know how many automobiles there are today? A lot, right. A lot. Here, let's do an audience poll. I want you to raise one hand for every car you own. If you own one car, raise one hand. If you own 2 cars, raise 2 hands. If you own 3 cars, stand up. Okay, how many cars do you own? Okay, look at this audience. This audience reflects what's going on in the United States, okay? Today in the United States, there are more automobiles than there are licensed drivers. There's a greater than 1-to-1 ratio between cars and people eligible to drive them. That's what I mean by abundance. Okay, let's do it. This is fun. Let's do another audience poll. How many of you have something in self-storage? What do you have in self-storage? A lot of business literature. Okay, so remainder copies of my books, like that kind of thing. What do you have in self-storage? Extra stuff. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. What's in self-storage, okay? Self-storage is an industry built on extra stuff. Now, that's interesting in its own right, okay? But let's look at this analytically, okay? Like I do, okay? What has happened? Let's look at some trend lines. What's happened to the size of the typical American dwelling over the last 50 years? Bigger, right? What's happened to the size of the typical American household over the last 50 years? Smaller. Class, what does that net out to? More space per person. In fact, I'm the only person in America who's gone back and actually looked at these numbers and crunched the data. I could only get clean data sets to 1974. Since 1974, in this country, there has been a 65% increase in residential space per capita. That's pretty amazing. Let's go back to our self-storage industry. So we got bigger houses, fewer people living in them, but a whole industry has emerged to house our extra stuff. I don't know if any of you are history buffs, but I wonder, do you think there was a self-storage industry during the Great Depression? No, it would have been preposterous. Today in America, the self-storage industry is a $17 billion a year business. It is larger than the motion picture business. There are more self-storage facilities in the United States than there are McDonald's restaurants, Wendy's restaurants, and Burger King restaurants combined. That's what I mean by self. That's what I mean by abundance. Now, abundance, remember, we're making an argument here. Abundance has 2 consequences for this tilt from left to right. Here's the first set of consequences. What's this? Very good. What kind of toilet brush? A designer toilet brush. This is a toilet brush designed by Michael Graves, one of the greatest product designers and architects of our time. In fact, he's so proud of this toilet brush that he has etched his signature here on the handle. Okay? So this is a signed designer toilet brush. That's what happens. Don't laugh at this. This is a serious economic point here. That's what happens in a world of abundance, okay? Suppose you're in the toilet. Don't laugh at this. This is a serious economic point. Suppose you're in the toilet brush business, okay? You want to sell toilet brushes. you face a threshold challenge if you want to sell more toilet brushes. What is that threshold challenge? The challenge you face is that in this country, we have pretty much cracked the engineering side of the toilet brush challenge, okay? We figured out how to make a toilet brush that more or less scrubs the bowl. So if you want to sell more toilet brushes, what do? Well, you either make a dramatic leap in toilet brush technology, which no one has done, or that leaves you, if you don't do that, you have two options. Compete on price. We don't like that. That's a downward death spiral. Or you compete not on these left brain features, functionality, but on these right brain features. You come out with a cool shade of blue. You come out with a nifty handle. You link it to other kinds of housewares. Even though, in a world of abundance, even the most mundane, utilitarian products, services, and experiences have become objects of desire, because that's how you stand out in a crowded marketplace. Let's go to another example. What's this? But not just any fly swatter, right? What kind of fly swatter? A three-legged fly swatter. But that's actually a very important point, which we'll get to in a moment. That's a very good, keen eye. This is a designer fly swatter, a Philippe Starck fly swatter. Okay? Designed by one of the great French designers. Now, if you were to take a design class, you would learn something on day one. The professor would come before you and say, class, design is a combination of utility and significance. Make sense? Utility and significance. Utility has to work. Significance, it has to have some other kind of attribute. Okay? This fly swatter has utility. If there were a fly here, I could swat it, kill it, put it in my self-storage locker. But think about, let's anthropomorphize this fly swatter for a moment. Think about this fly swatter's life. How much does it spend in utility? Very little. It spends more of its life in significance, and that's where your point comes in. That's why the ingenious move here is to equip it with a pedestal, so it can hang out and be significant. Now, again, I'm a left-brain guy, so this significant stuff I don't quite get. I can sort of get it intellectually. Here's what I do care about. Math and money, okay? Let's talk about those two things. How much do you think the plastic in that fly swatter is worth? 2 cents? Penny? How much does this retail for, do you think? $5? Higher. $9.99? Higher. $14. Okay? Let's say, I'm going to save you from getting an MBA, because here's what you learn. Class, selling 3 cents of plastic for $14, those are what we call margins. Here's the point. Increasingly, in a world of abundance, you get your margins out of significance rather than utility. Okay? This fly swatter costs $14 not because it's the most utilitarian fly swatter, but because it's the most significant. You get your margins out of significance rather than utility. That's one way abundance tilts the scales.
So that's the first part there. It took him a while to get to it, but it won't take him as long to get to the other two. But he had to go back in history, and he had to kind of lead up to that whole idea that, you know, we're in a world of abundance. Everybody has everything they need. You know, that's getting back to this, you know, 1% in 2050. And we look around and we say, well, we have everything we need now. But what's going to drive that is creating products that we don't even know we needed. And when we look back, you know, within the last 10 years, the whole idea of the you know, the smartphone and the iPod and all that stuff has come about, not because we needed it necessarily. In fact, 10 years ago, we didn't even know we needed it. We didn't even know what we would use it for. But we found use for it. We found business use for it as well. So what he's saying there is true. And we've seen products come about only because they're different and they're significant. And let me get past this abundance stuff here now. We'll talk about the Asia piece. I think this is it here.
Stuff that's about meaning, purpose, and significance. Okay, we're making an argument here. Abundance, Asia, automation tilting the scales. Let's go to Asia. Here are 6 people I met in Mumbai, India, not too long ago. All of them do work for North American companies. Some Canadian companies, several American companies, one German company. All of them do work that you get paid maybe $60,000, $65,000 a year for in the United States. None of these people who have degrees in computer science and engineering makes more than $15,000 a year. You've all heard about offshoring and outsourcing. let me tell you what I think you need to know about offshoring and outsourcing and its effect on your career and your business. Offshoring, massively, massively, massively overhyped in the short term. Massively overhyped in the short term. The number of jobs lost to offshoring so far, in the grand scheme of things, has been relatively small. Fewer than the typical turnover in a single month in American labor markets. Okay? Short term, impact hasn't been great. Overhyped in the short term. But, offshoring, I hate to break it to you, is actually underhyped in the long term. It's underhyped in the long term. And the reason I say that is not because I like hyperbole, not because I like to stoke fear in my fellow citizens. It's because I can do math. I want to stack up 3 numbers for you to show you what I mean. First number begins with this. India, and I'm using India as the embodiment of Asia only because I've had the good fortune of spending a lot of time there, and I think it's one of the most exciting places on earth right now. India has an advantage in the global economy. India is very big. Okay? India has 1 billion people. Okay? Now, for those of you who are liberal arts majors in college, 1 billion is a very large number. Okay? What do we know about large numbers? We know about the statistical principle called the law of large numbers, which states if you take a small percentage of a very, very large number, you get another large number. So, let's say that 15%, 15% of India's population makes it to this status. Okay? 15%, meaning 85% basically get left behind from this way of living. Okay? 15% of 1 billion is 150 million. 150 million. You know how large the entire U.S. workforce is? 150 million. So, if 85% of India's population gets left behind, you've got as many upper middle class, talented, well-educated, ambitious Indians as you have workers in a $12 trillion economy. That's number 1. 150, that's the first number. India is going to be the largest English-speaking country on the planet when? 2010. United States of America in 4 years is not going to be the largest English-speaking country in the world. That's a remarkable thing. I didn't think that would happen in my lifetime. Okay? Now, let's talk about, again, let's talk about money and math, my 2 favorite subjects. What is the cost of communication between the United States, North America, and India? What's a trend line look like? Up or down? The cost of communication between the United States and India. Down. You want to see how far down? It's so far down. The trend line is circular, actually. It's 0. Okay? So, let's stack this up. Okay? We're just doing math here. Let's stack this up. 150 million upper middle class people speak perfect English, connected to North America for free. Okay, that might have an effect. And here's the effect that it's going to have. And if you remember nothing else here, I would like you to remember one word, particularly if you have children. These facts have made one word the most dangerous word in the economy. They have made one word a vocational death sentence. They've made one word a word that will obliterate your career, obliterate your business. I'm going to share you this word. Share this word with you if you can take it. The scariest word. I want you to know this word. I want your kids to know this word. In fact, I want your kids to write it on their notebooks, look at it each morning, and run screaming in the other direction. That's how terrifying this word is. Routine. Routine. Any kind of routine work is going to disappear from this country, period. What do I mean by routine work? Routine work is any work you can reduce to a script, to a spec sheet, to a formula, to a set of rules, to a series of steps that produces the right answer. Okay? That's what I mean by routine work. And you know what? That's the kind of work that used to get you into the middle class. Certain kinds of financial analysis, certain kinds of accounting, certain kinds of legal work, okay? That kind of work, anything that is routine where you can write down the steps and delivers the right answer, that kind of work is gone. It is going to disappear from this country, period. Some of it's gone. The rest of it's going to follow over the next several years. We've seen this movie before. This is what happened to mass production work. The United States still does plenty of mass production work, plenty of manufacturing. We've got the largest manufacturing economy in the world. We just got so good at it, we do it with fewer people. And the work gets increasingly sophisticated. A factory floor today has robots, computers, people with associate's degrees, because all the routine white, blue-collar work has gone. The routine white-collar work is following its way out. Now, class, let's go back to our metaphor. Which side of the brain is routine? step by step, okay, left. So you ship this to India, okay, bye. What are you left with? Half a brain. But the important half now. Okay. That is Asia. Now, let's go to automation, okay? It's the same story, okay? We've seen this movie before, too. Last century, machine...
Okay, so the Asia part of it is really what Chapter 15 is kind of skirting the issue. It talks about, you know, the global economy and moving information systems into global use and things like that. But what they don't come out and say in Chapter 15 is that, you know, there is a big disconnect going on, and he revealed it in his talk there. One of the big disconnects are these two numbers here: 65,000 versus 15,000, and the fact that you know, 150 million people. Just if you just look at India, not the rest of Asia, because the numbers would be quite a bit larger, as we know, have degrees and master's degrees in engineering and computer science and business, and they will work for $15,000 a year. That's a good wage, because their cost of living is not as high as ours. So, you know, that is going to be an attraction, and it is already an attraction. A friend of mine, he teaches international business here, Paul Boudelier. He's from Halifax, but he comes over to teach international business, and he has a course coming up this January. And he's done a lot of international business. That's why he can teach it so effectively. But one of the cases he was telling me is that they opened up the province of Nova Scotia opened up a trade office in Vietnam, and they were going to hire Nova Scotians to go over and work in Vietnam, and they realized when they got there that there was a lot of good people there. There was a lot of people that spoke, you know, real good English and had really good education. And he said, well, why would we bother shipping Nova Scotians over to work in this trade office? Because the idea was they wanted to do, province of Nova Scotia wanted to do more trade in that part of the world. And so what they decided to do was they had a budget, right, to hire, I think it was 2 or 3 Nova Scotian people, and pay them, you know, $75,000, $80,000 a year to work over there. But they decided to hire local people, and they hired them, you know, in this type of ratio, where they could get, you know, 4 for the cost of 1, and so they ended up hiring 6 people that were from there, and they did extremely well. And you know, it was just something they didn't know before going over there. So it's already happening, right? And you know, we might think that the largest English-speaking country in the world has to be, you know, somewhere in North America or Europe, but it's not. You know, it's not anymore. And you know, the fact that 0 is the cost of communications, and that really opens up, you know, a whole lot of possibilities.
Machines replaced human back, human muscle. This century, software is replacing the human brain. But let's go to it again. What part of the brain can software replace? Exactly, not the artistic empathic side, the logical, linear, rule-based, get me the right answer side. So now you see certain kinds of white-collar professions at risk of automation in a way that we haven't seen before. Give you an example. My parents told me to go to law school, even if I didn't want to be a lawyer, because they said, Danny, still call me Danny into my 40s, Danny, we won't talk about that, Danny, you got to go to law school because there's something to fall back on. Okay, classic, middle-class phrase. I'm not sure anymore. I want to give you a delicious example of how even law can be automated. Let's say you want to get an uncontested, I'm in Washington, D.C., and I want to stipulate here that I'm very happily married. Let's say you live in Washington, D.C. and want to get an uncontested divorce, okay? You go to a lawyer to get an uncontested divorce in Washington, D.C., and it's going to cost you about $2,000. But an uncontested divorce is not very complicated, is it? It's uncontested, right? They just want to get away from each other. So what does a lawyer in an uncontested divorce actually do? Think about what a lawyer in an uncontested divorce actually does. First, he or she tries to make it contested, okay? But assuming he or she can't do that, they fill out forms, right? We could do a little bit of research in 20 minutes in this audience right here, find exactly what it is a lawyer in the District of Columbia did to get somebody an uncontested divorce. We could list the steps. That makes it the R word. What happens to the R word? It gets offshored or it gets automated. So now in this great country you have a choice. You can go to that lawyer for $2,000, or you can go to CompleteCase.com for affordable divorce solutions. Couple people in the back writing down that URL right now. What happens at CompleteCase.com? Here's what happens at CompleteCase.com. You go to the website, you pull down the menu, you pick your state, you check the residency requirements, you go to the form, you fill it out yourself. They then transmit the form electronically to a lawyer, because the state bar regulations require a lawyer to actually, bless the document, okay? So they ship it electronically to a lawyer who blesses the document. I bless thee, okay? They pay that lawyer $50. The one guy who did worse than I did in law school has actually his job. Lawyer blesses the document, they ship it off to the courthouse, and you've got yourself a divorce, not for $2,000, not for $1,500, not for $1,000, not for $500, but for $249. Now, think about that. Think about being the lawyer doing the routine uncontested divorce. You've got a competitor coming in. They're not charging $1,800 or $1,750. They're coming in and saying, I'm going to do the exact same thing faster for 85% less. That's a big deal. You see it now in its incipient stages with medical diagnosis, because medical diagnosis is about following decision trees that bracket to yes-no questions. You see it also with our friends the accountants, okay? We had a large number of U.S. tax returns done in India because an Indian chartered accountant makes $500 a month. Well, you had 21 million Americans who did their taxes on TurboTax, on a piece of software. This is the accountant job killer right here. 21 million Americans did their taxes on a $39.95 piece of software rather than go to an accountant. Because certain kinds of accounting is routine, logical, linear, step-by-step. So we add these all up: abundance, Asia, automation, and it's tilting the scales. The left brain abilities are necessary but no longer sufficient. The right brain abilities have become the first among equals. Now, in that kind of setting, you need to look very hard at what you're doing and ask yourself these three questions. These three questions. Can someone overseas do it cheaper? Can a computer do it faster? And is what you're selling in demand in an age of abundance? That is, does what you're selling have significance? That's the whole ballgame right here, folks. That's the whole ballgame right here. Now, what doesn't pass this test? Certain kinds of accounting, certain kinds of financial analysis, certain kinds of law, certain kinds of things our parents told us to do. What does pass this test? Designers, artists, nurses, teachers, inventors, entrepreneurs, people who are multifaceted. Those are the abilities that are really going to matter the most. What matters, we tend to obsess over high-tech abilities, but and I'm old enough to remember when people on the resume would put that they had computer skills, okay? It seems kind of silly now. I've got a 9-year-old daughter with computer skills, okay? Don't tell me about computer skills. What matters more than these high-tech abilities are abilities that are high concept and high touch. Hard to outsource, hard to automate, and that deliver significance.
Yeah, so we'll leave it at there for now, because I think we got through everything that was important. But yeah, it does encompass a lot of the things that were contained in Chapter 15, perhaps a little bit more. The last part we saw there was automation, and the fact that software is doing away with some of the routine jobs, and we can see that, right? We can see that in tax preparation software, and the example he showed there in a non-contested divorce, using software to basically fill out forms that still have to be signed by a lawyer, but 85% less cost. So, you might find, an equal number of people who have a convincing argument that routine work will stay forever. It'll be part of our workforce forever. And I'm not saying that he's got some type of crystal ball and he's right and everybody else is wrong. But the more you listen to him, you know, and he's done a couple of books now, and you know they all hit the bestseller list, and you know he's doing okay as far as moving this information out to various people. And you know I can see it, and you know that's part of the reason why you know I would say that post-secondary education might be you know completely changed in the next 10 years. Education in general, you know, right down to the kindergarten grade 1 level might be changed forever, because those are the things that change. You know, the routine type of work that can be automated, can go away, can be done a different way, and we just can't imagine it being done any other way now because we're so used to doing what we're doing. Right? I'm talking and you're listening. You know that's a pretty old model, right? That's 200 years old. And can we do it another way? Sure. You know, does it require buildings? Probably not. So, you know, maybe we'll see that. You know, maybe I'll be right. But we'll have to wait and see. So, that's how quickly things change and jobs go away and new jobs come. And it happens all the time. So let's take a look then at project number 6 that we have in front of us this week, and it's due on Saturday. It's again, it's getting you to develop something that can be considered software, something that didn't exist before you came along. Coming up with this idea was a little bit of a mashup for me. I took you know, some ideas from an Excel spreadsheet that I found online, where this guy was putting this URL into an Excel spreadsheet and bringing the information back to a spreadsheet. And I said, well, if you can put that URL into a spreadsheet from Yahoo Finance, this one here, then you could put it into a software program, and the software program could go and get the numbers from Yahoo Finance, bring them back, and show them on the screen. So then I got thinking, well, you know, to do that, you'd have to write some code, right? And but then I got looking a little bit further, and I said, well, wait a minute now. There's this thing out there called live code that will help out significantly and get us to the point where we need to be. So in the instructions, what I just went through there was a couple of examples of going to Yahoo Finance and asking for the stock symbol Microsoft and the price of Microsoft stock. And then this second one, I'm asking for the name and the price. So I just get $48.87 there, but this one here I get the name and the price. And then if you want to get more than one, you just say I want GE plus Microsoft, and I want the name and the price. And that gives you General Electric and Microsoft and the prices for both. So then I got digging, and I could, what else can you get? And I came up with there's a lot of different things that you can ask for. You can ask for the high, the low, the bid, the ask, the name, you know, what it did over the last 52 weeks, and all that kind of weird stuff. So that's where the idea for this project came along. So the instructions then, the first thing to do is to download live code, and to do that, you go back to the page here. Just click on the link here to the live code software, and we have to make sure that we download the correct version, right? So we go here to the download link, which is the first link, and we always want the community edition, because they kind of disguise the fact that it's free by calling it the Community Edition. So that's the one that we want. So all they ask for is your first name and your email address, and you know what? Why are you looking for this? Either you are a programmer, or you're not a programmer, or you're an educator. And then you can download the Community Edition, and it installs just like any other application on your computer, and it will show up here in your list of programs. So there, there's where mine sits, right on the Start menu in Windows, and then the Apple side of my machine, it's under my applications. It's in my applications folder. So that's the software, and you know, it as far as I know, it shouldn't be any problem getting it. Like I say, I downloaded for both Apple and Windows, and it didn't seem to give me any trouble at all. So what we want to do then is we want to call an API, application program interface, inside our program in order to display the information on stocks. So we're going to create the following using live code. We're going to add buttons, and this is just a list of instructions. Basically, add the buttons, add 4 labels, add 4 text entry fields, and that will just make our application more readable. And then the following code is what is on the Apple button, and this is the code. This is the way they write instructions in the live code software. So they create a local variable, and they call that variable X. And then they put the URL into a request, and it goes out to finance.yahoo.com, and it brings back the Apple information, the name and the bid and the high and the low, and those are the 4 things that we want. And it puts that into X. It puts that into that variable that we created up there. We call it local. It's a local variable, only to be used locally or within this program that we're writing. So this program, in fact, owns this variable, and it can get information that's stored in it. So it goes and it gets item 1. It says put item 1 of line 1 of X into field name ANS. And then it goes and gets item 2, item 3, item 4, and it puts them into these named boxes. And the named boxes are what's on the screen here. So this is name ANS, or name answer. And this is bid, and this is high, and this is low. And you can have them in any order that you want. It really doesn't matter. And so it goes out to Yahoo Finance. Everything comes back into one line of information, and then it breaks up the line into 4 parts, and it separates the pieces of information, puts them in the boxes, and that's it. So if you wanted to change that for Google, or Microsoft, which is the next one, you would change the AAPL to MSFT, and then you'd have Microsoft. And it would bring back a line for Microsoft. And you'd have to create 4 names, 4 different names for these 4 boxes here. So you'd call it maybe name ANS1 or name ANS2 or whatever you wanted to call it, but it would have to be called something different to know what box to populate. So that's basically how it works. And what I went on to say here was, in addition to all of that, here's some other stuff we can get with these codes. if we go to Yahoo Finance, we can ask for, things like volume, what stock exchange is traded on, what was the last trade, what was the trade date, what's the change in percent, what's the previous close, all of that stuff you can get. You just have to tack it on to your request URL. This thing here, you see it has, right now it has S, B, G, and H. And it's bringing back whatever S is, whatever B is, and storing that in our variable called X. So that's what it's doing. So you could mix it up. You could ask for something different. As long as you capture it, make a box for it, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to get it. So what you'll be submitting then is your live code file, and I'll just show you what that looks like. I think I got one here in the Dropbox folder. Yeah, this is it here. So I just called it Stock App for Business 241, and it's a type. It's a live code file, and it's instead of having a .xls or .doc, it would be .livecode. That's the type of file it is. And so you'd submit that up into Moodle, and that's all you have to submit. So when I see your submission, I will download it and double click on it, and it will open like this, and I'll try out your application, and I'll put it in test mode, which these two buttons here are critical, because the one on the right is design, the one on the left is for testing. And when I click on the Apple button, it goes out and gets the information and brings it back. Microsoft and Google, it does the same. And then I created this button down below here that clears everything out. So if we look at how that was all done, I'm back in design mode now. I click on the Apple button, you see it doesn't do anything. Because I'm in design mode, it thinks that I want to change something and move it around, so I could actually move this button around, right? I could put it down here, or I could make it bigger or smaller. But I could also look at the code that's behind it. And there's the code that's behind it. Now I did change it a bit from the example that we saw in the instructions. I realized that some of this stuff may have been out of order. So the SBGH is what I asked for, and then I put it into these fields, which is name, bid, high, and low. But it's basically the code that we saw in the instructions. So to create the next button, once I know that worked right, I just copied that code, highlighted it, right-clicked on it, said copy. And if that works, then I should be able to use the same code over here for Microsoft. Just paste it in, and the only one thing I have to change is put MSFT in there and call these boxes something different. Put a 2 at the end of it, or something, a different name, right? And then I've got it working for that button as well. So these boxes here, they have to be called something, right? So you would create these boxes by dragging them over, same as these are buttons that I can drag over and create a new button. I can also drag over a field, scrolling field, or text entry field. That's what I use for these. There's the text entry field. And we have to give that a name, same as we gave these a name, right? So if you right click on it and go to properties, we'll see that it is called name ANS. So there's only one box on this whole screen that's called name ANS. Before I put that name in, it was called something by default. Let me just see what it was called. It was called whatever this one's called. It was just called field. So I had to change field to name ANS. And when I created this text entry field here, I had to make sure that I called it something different, right? So it's called name ANS2. And this one over here is called name ANS3. So that's how the whole thing works, is that it puts numbers and words into these boxes, but you have to tell it, so much, right? Because it doesn't know, it can't read, in other words. It has to be told what to do with the information coming in. And that in and of itself is kind of revealing, because a lot of times we would think that, computer programming, there's maybe an element of artificial intelligence that, surely to God the software would be smart enough to know that there's 3 columns of empty boxes there, and because the button is above, because the Google button is above these boxes, that these boxes refer to that button. No, it doesn't make that connection. It's not that smart. You have to tell it, oh, by the way, put the Google information in these 4 boxes, and here's what they're called. So you have to get down to that level, and it's at that level that computer programmers work at all day. That minute, detailed, specific, where everything has to be correct, and if you miss a semicolon, if you miss a period in your instruction, or a comma, or a quotation mark, you could be there for days trying to find your mistake. So that's really what I'm trying to get across to you, is that this thing that we call computer programming takes a special kind of person to want to write that stuff, and that's easy. Like that can't even be considered a language. It's that easy. But that's how specific you have to be. You have to tell it where to put everything on the screen. And so, to be in computer programming, you really have to like working at the detail level. And computer programs are a massive effort. Massive. There's hundreds of programmers needed to create something like Microsoft Word. There's something like 2 billion lines of code in Microsoft Word. Programmers, if they write 20 lines of code a day, good code that works, it's probably a good day's work. So how many programmers would it take to write 2 billion lines? A lot, right? Yeah. And a lot of time. So it's not easy, and it's not for everyone. But at least now you know, right, how detailed it is. And there's only one piece that I didn't show you, and that was down here in the clear button. Some people asked me to give them a hand with this clear button down here, because I didn't have this in the instructions. But what it is just a matter of saying put empty into name ANS, put empty into name ANS2, ANS3. And all we're doing is putting empty. And what is empty? Empty is nothing, right? To this language, to this live code engine, we'll call it, empty means put nothing in there. In other languages, you might have to put a null value. You might have to put You know, something like double quote, right, with nothing in between it, not even space. Just double quote means null, a null value. Other languages might require that. But this one here works on the premise that empty means nothing. So that's how we clear everything out, is by putting empty into all of these boxes 12 times. But when you press the button, it happens so quick that, you know, we think, oh, gee, that's magic, right? Because every time we press the button, we get the updated numbers, and then we press clear, everything goes away. No, so the good thing about this software is that you can, if we save it, just, you know, when you save it, it just wants to save it in live code. So when you do a file save as, you know, it'll just call it a live code stack, right? But if you do want to compile this program and have it, and you know, have it so that it'll run on various computers, and you can give it out to your friends, say, here's a little program I wrote, you can also do that, right? You can save it in another way. You can now here it is here. You can save it as a standalone application, which means that the person that you give this to doesn't have to have live code to run it. You can just give it to them on a USB stick or get it to them somehow, and when they click on it, this will pop up and it will run the same as it does here. So that's pretty neat. Pretty neat. So there's one more thing that I wanted to mention. Collectively, we did a great job on the case study 2. I just wanted to close that off by thanking everybody that was able to contribute to our class app store. This is all the apps here. There's 84 between the two classes. There's 84 apps that we thought of collectively, which was a whole lot of right brain thinking, I know, because you had to think design, right? You had to think of an idea, and sometimes that's not easy. And a lot of them were really interesting, and you know, I could see almost every one of them being a valid application that someone would want to use. And over here on the side, we see that you know, the buying is still going on, and leading the race is an app called Free Ride. There's 20 people that bought that, and you're welcome to keep buying over the next couple of days, and we'll let it run probably until the end of this week, and we'll see there at the end of the week who the top selling app is. But right now it's the app called Free Ride. So that's pretty good. So it was a very creative process. You know, there was things that had to be drawn, and you did have to call a bit on your creative abilities to do that. And I know it wasn't easy, but it proves that you can do that, right? You can be creative and do something like that. And then the second part of the case study was, okay, let's crunch some numbers and see if we can ever make any money off this thing, and how many would we have to sell in order to make a decent amount of money. So yeah, it worked out pretty good, and probably better than I expected anyway. And it was great to have that many submissions for sure. So that's it for Business 241 for this semester. Hopefully everybody had a great class. It's always fun. I learn something every time I teach it, or I wouldn't be teaching it if I didn't. And it was great to see everybody apply themselves and and the projects and case studies were well done, and all the marks are not in yet, but from what I can forecast, it's going to be a really good class average coming out of it. The marks are up into the 80s and 90s, and so it's all good that way for sure. So we'll see you probably around the building next semester if you're a business student. If you're a non-business student, I'll see you around campus, and have a good break, and we'll see you in January.